we ready? Can you hear me? Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Neha Kumar, and I consider it a tremendous honor to be here to be introducing Dr. Helena Mentis for the SIGCHI Lifetime Service Award. And I have to say that it's been quite a journey to be working with her over the last many years. I want to introduce you to a few of her achievements in the time that she has been SIGCHI president, even before, and then we'll let her do the talking. I've been told in a session where I did some hefty interviewing of Helena to find out how far back her service to SIGCHI goes. And actually, she set up 3 SIGCHI chapters as a student. And that's how her journey began. She served in many different capacities in the Works in Progress co-chair, which she was also responsible for renaming to Late Breaking Works. She's been in many different organizing roles for CHI, CSCW, subcommittee chairing, doctoral consortium chairing, and such. In 2015, she became the executive vice president alongside Lauren Terveen, and then took on the role of SIGCHI president. I'll walk you through a few of the things that she's done as SIGCHI president. So in addition to leading a committee of 15 to 25 members, overseeing conferences, publications, local and global initiatives, community, and care. She's also represented the SIG at the SIG Governing Board, and on many occasions, this does feel like a full-time job. And also at the time that she did it was when we were going through the pandemic, and that's when, if you recall, CHI had to go online. There were many conferences that were dealing with their versions of the crisis, and she really led us through that period, and we ended up still being a financially viable SIG, and I would say a lot of the credit goes to her leadership at this time. I've been working with her since, and I would say that a lot of the work that she did around the time of the Black Lives Matter period, when we really took a step back to reflect as a SIG, as a community, to think about how we could be opening up structures more, be more inclusive. She created roles for adjunct chairs for accessibility, which then led to the creation of a VP accessibility, and accessibility has been a core value for us. She was also leading when the ACM violations database was introduced, and she made efforts to make this widely known, and this is an effort that is still appreciated by SIGs across ACM. There's really such a long list of things that I had listed in my nomination. I wanted to introduce you to some of those, and I would say that even after having served on the SIGCHI Executive Committee as president, she's been past president for the last 4.5 years, and there's really very few meetings that she ever misses. She's been committed to SIGCHI Cares, which she co-founded. I would say there's no part of the SIG that she isn't completely familiar with. I want to thank her for giving so much of her time, and I will say that this is really, I mean, it's recognizing all of the service that she has done, but I would say that it's also really awarding her a lifetime of service. So that's award. Thank you, Helena. It's been really a pleasure working with you. I'm trying to not get emotional here. I don't know anyone who's been as supportive of a leader and as supportive of the collective that we are. Thank you so much for all of your years of service.
I warned her that I was not bringing waterproof mascara, so she wasn't allowed to make me cry. I wanted to actually start by, it's not very often that you start a presentation by your thanks, and this is where I want to start right now. Obviously, my nominator I want to thank in the awards committee, but I also want to thank all the folks that I can kind of see out there who I've served over the years and who I've worked with. I really think that this award sounds a lot like an individual award, but service is really about working with and for the community, and I certainly don't feel like I've done any of this by myself. It sounded like a long list. Maybe the only thing I feel I can truly take credit for is not saying no enough times, particularly to Neha. So because of this, I struggled a little bit with what to talk about because I didn't think anybody wanted to hear me go through my CV, although it's quite riveting. Funny enough, though, much of my experience and knowledge and pain and laughter in my service to the community just kind of gets subsumed in just a title, just one line on a CV. So instead, I kind of thought that I would change this talk and make it about myths that I've heard, pervasive myths around service within SIGCHI. I want to dispel some of those myths because I want everybody to want to engage in service to build the organization for the community that they want, the community that's been my scientific home for, and I did the math, over a quarter of a century, so that sneaks up on you fast. So I started my service, actually, as Neha pointed out, without even realizing that I was doing service. I started a student SIGCHI chapter when I was working on my master's at Cornell, and then I moved on to Philadelphia because I needed to get out of school for a little while, and I started PhillyChi, which to this day I'm still proud is still an active SIGCHI chapter, very active, and now that I'm back in Philadelphia, I get to engage with them all over again. So I did these different chapters because I was just trying to build community in my local area to make the HCI ties a little bit stronger. What I didn't know is by engaging in that little bit of local service, I'd be subsumed into the greater SIGCHI as well. Back then we used to have a whole workshop dedicated to chapters, and I was able to go to that and meet other chapter leaders. Here's one of the first one, and there's little Helena in the middle. I found this on like an old drive, this photo. So this is this will just teach you, save all your old photos. But there are people in this picture that I've had a relationship with ever since within SIGCHI. Morton, who is right behind me, I actually ran into him in the hallways, and we were like, what's up? And Adam Swarka. This is also how I met Elizabeth Churchill, who's always been a great advisor over the years. She was VP chapters at the time. And there's Gerrit, who's all the way on the left over there. He was the president of SIGCHI at the time. Those chapter workshops were so important for folks to understand how SIGCHI works, how ACM works, and how to sort of get into the mind of the organization and try to link that organization up with the needs of all of the members. And I think what I'm saying here is that this is way more than just a line on your CV for all the little bits and tiny little service things you do, because each one of these is starting to create relationships and build knowledge within yourself to achieve things later on and have continued impact no matter what service role you do. So it's a continual education process that you should be enjoying along the way. And it didn't go. And this leads to myth number 2, that things don't change, or for instance, I can't be the change. So after I was doing all of the workshops, my advisor at the time was Mary Beth Rosen, and she became the general chair for CHI 2006. Actually, both Cliff and I were on that organizing committee, so that was 20 years ago, buddy. And both of us will tell you that that conference, being in that organizing committee is not at all what CHI is today. It just highlights how much has changed in those 20 years. This SIG is also not at all the same thing that we were dealing with at the time. There's really no way that a conference has doubled in size and the number of conferences have doubled and for all of that to stay the same. And I'm not just talking about the scale that's changed, but really the people themselves are so different. And so I've just seen so much change over these past 20 years. I found this old interactions article that actually Lauren, myself, Aaron, and Philippe had written about the creation of the CHI Steering Committee, and this was written in October of 2018. So it just goes to show you that the conference itself grew and had to change by creating a CHI Steering Committee. And it wasn't that long ago. People don't know that, too. They think we've always had a CHI Steering Committee. And so we talk about the fact that the conference actually had to create steering committees over the years for all of the conferences. So each of our conferences didn't even start with a steering committee, something that we assume is so natural and it's just the way we've always done. No, it's not the way we've always done. And now you can see my role as the old lady who comes in, and I regularly have the historical perspective of SIGCHI, and I say, well, those things had to change. And because of that change, that means all of this is man-made and it can continue to change. We can continue to critique and to look at and say, is this now serving our needs? Because at the time we created something to serve our needs, but we should be always asking, does it? Neha pointed out about the fact that I was late-breaking work co-chair back for 2016 Chi, which again, Cliff, I was joking, he was technical program chair for that year. And when I took on this role, Joe Fishkay, who was the general chair, he said, I want you to figure out what this venue should be. And that's because back then we called it Works in Progress. And you can actually still find this Tumblr post, it's out there on the internet, where I went through painstaking detail to talk about the history of posters and works in progress and why we should change the name to Late Breaking Work. And this year, we're now posters, and I'm okay with that. I think it's actually great that the steering committee took a second and took a step back and said, what is this now? How has it changed? And what do we want it to be? And so I'm really excited when I see change, even if it's removing change that I did, because I really want to see our community to continue to grow and to change. And as you can see, I actually like documenting change, so I really encourage everybody to document. You can find a lot of random Medium posts that I have done over the years. It makes writing your Lifetime Service Award talk really a lot easier too. Myth number 3 is that change can happen quickly. So I just talked about change. On the other side of things, there's a bit of a relationship between scale of change and the time frame for that change. So this is a picture from an EC meeting in Madrid in 2018. We went to Madrid, the EC went to have their meeting there and to engage with folks within the greater Iberian Peninsula community because there had been a request. We want to bring Kai here. We have this growing HCI community down here. Please, we've always sort of been in the north of Europe. Can we please have something here? And we're here in Barcelona in 2026, 8 years later, and I am so happy because I see the culmination of this dinner. But I also recognize that change takes time. It takes a while to get Barcelona into the rotation of conferences, and so sometimes you just have to be a little bit patient for that change. Open calls is another thing. We were kind of doing it half-heartedly, a little bit here, a little bit there in our conferences. And when we were looking for new VP at Larges in 2019, Lauren Terveen and I sat down and we said, we're gonna make open calls the de facto way that we get people into volunteer positions. So we wrote up this open calls volunteering sort of proposal, guidelines. This is, I think, the original one. It's been updated over the years. I went into the Wayback Machine to find originals. But this is how we ended up bringing in Neha into the ECs, because we had that open call and she stepped up. I understand also that sometimes change takes, it not only takes time to become a normal thing that we do, but we also sort of have to figure it out a little bit as we go along. So it's not like, boom, change. It's sort of a very slow growing aspect. And for instance, I'm on this Chi SC, SIGCHI EC joint committee to find the 2028 GCs and TPCs, and we did a whole open call, but we spent a lot of time talking about how do we want to write this open call? How do we engage a community? What is sort of like the process that we want to feel, that we want to achieve, and how do we determine that we're really like getting the best team together? And I think we're doing an amazing job, and I love the fact that every week this group of people who really don't have enough time to be doing this are really engaged and are really trying to engage in this open call process and to find this amazing team that we're working on. Finally, a little of my own plug. Interactive Health is starting this summer, and Interactive Health is just a baby that we've been trying to birth for quite a really long time. I tie it back to CHI 2010, where Jillian Hayes and Desney Tan, I remember, had done the workshop on interactive systems in healthcare, WISH. WISH continued for so many years, and there was this constant conversation. We need an interactive health conference. And it just takes time. We wanted to make sure that we were doing it right. And now we have an amazing steering committee who's been working nonstop for the past 2 years in making this a reality. And I'm really excited for this summer to see the first version of Interactive Health. So this is the big myth that I've come across over the years. It's a multi-stage myth that service is for super senior members who get paid and then have all the power. And honestly, I kind of wish any part of that sentence was true. So for the first part, that it's super senior, I have to say that hasn't been the case within CHI or SIGCHI for too long. You can't have such a growing organization and have only the same 5 people do all the work. Just to give you an idea, when I was elected as vice president, it was 8 years after I was that chair's assistant, and it was only 5 years from when I graduated from my PhD. Now I look back on it and realize I was a baby. But when Lauren asked me to run with him as VP, I, no lie, said to him, "But I'm not an old white male. Why do you want me to run for the SIGCHI VP position?" And that's because I held that myth. I didn't understand what he would possibly be looking to me for. And he said, well, that's why we want the next generation to step up. We don't just want all the same people to be serving in the SIGCHI EC. And I've continued to try to push for that within SIGCHI and all of our conferences. I'm going to take this as a moment to say next year is the EC election, and I really am trying to put together a slate of candidates of the next generation. So I'm really asking folks to come and to talk to me about it. I'm more than happy to answer all your questions. The second part of that myth is that we get paid, and I wrote this slide before the town hall, and I thought it was funny that it came up in the town hall, because this is a really popular one that folks think that volunteers are getting paid, that the general chairs get paid to run CHI. And the answer is a resounding no. For the most part, folks are seen on stage, all of these folks that you see on stage, they're doing it as a secondary job because they actually have a real job, and they're doing it for free. So service is literally a service to your community. So occasionally there's a dinner, a perk such as that. So here's me having dinner with Cliff and Lauren Terveen. I know, look at that. I'm going to tell you this, they look really happy, but this was after a really long day stuck in a hotel basement meeting room. I don't know if you remember that. It was a really grueling day. And to be honest, no amount of travel and dinners make up for the time taken away from your research, your work, your family. Unless you bring your 1-month-old child to an EC meeting so you can breastfeed her over the course of 3 days, a 3-day meeting. I recognize at this point I might have just lost folks who were thinking about talking to me to run for an elective position. So I'm going to say that I'm always honest, so that's why you should come and ask me questions. But really, the payment is about the impact that you can have. It's not about any dinners. And so it's about having impact on something that you care about. And honestly, if you're here, you should care about it. I imagine you do care about it. The final part of this is I had polled a bunch of people and asked them myths that they've heard, and this came from my colleague Ding Wang, and she said that, well, the thing is that service is not power. People think that we have a lot of power in these positions, especially leadership positions, and the thing is, it's a position of power, but it's not power in and of itself. So I've served as a member of CARES since the beginning, and I've never seen the limits of positions of leadership as I have as a member of CARES. This is an amazing group of people who are trying to provide power to members of our community who are harassed, abused, and bullied. At the time when we started it, I was president of SIGCHI. I was friends with all the general chairs. I literally had the ACM president on speed dial. But my power, our power as a collective group, didn't come from any of those positions. It came from our knowledge of how to navigate complex, sometimes no-win situations. And early on in my tenure as EVP and P, members of our community have been advocating for accessibility standards at all of our conferences. And although having leadership and policies at the top are important, I've always made the argument that it's every single volunteer who needs to be engaged in ensuring safety, accessibility, inclusion, and care. The power to change and maintain change can be a collective power, and that is far greater than anything that can come from senior leadership. So if you want to serve your community, I encourage you to become curious. Use every one of your service experiences to understand the organization, understand the needs, and use that knowledge and the relationships that you build to have, to create support for the many other members of your community in whatever role you hold, because every one of those roles actually holds the power. My final myth is that you can't say no to service. And I think we really need to realize that saying no is not a bad thing. I know that lots of junior folks worry that if they say no to an opportunity, they are never going to be asked to do it again. That is not the case. To believe it or not, people are not clamoring over one another for positions. This is why I'm begging people to want to serve on the EC to come forward. But also, I've gone through a lot of times where I've dropped the ball because I'm just doing too much. So an example, a small one, is early on, I had a particularly bad year as an associate chair because I had a new baby and I didn't realize I couldn't do both as well as I wanted. The best example of me dropping the ball, though, when I was doing too much was early in 2020. I was about a year and a half in as a SIGCHI president, but I was also associate dean of my college and I had 2 young kids. I was making it work, and then COVID hit. And everything started shutting down, and there was drama on every single one of those fronts. But I just kept going, ultimately being a detriment to my own health, both physically and mentally. I dropped the ball on properly communicating with one of our committees on why they couldn't do what they wanted to do, and what were the opportunities for them pivoting. And that led to a lot of pain for them and other members of the EC. It was a learning opportunity for me to take care and communicate intent and listening with regards to impact. But I also took the opportunity to work with all to devise a volunteer handbook that started with a volunteer rights and responsibilities. And a key component of this list of rights and responsibilities is, I think it's number 4, is the right to step down from your position. And this was actually a really important thing that we talked about, that you have the right to end your volunteer position without penalty and without an explanation. It could be that you have some personal situation that's changed, or maybe the role is not what you were expecting. The more that we normalize people being able to be honest with the fact that they just can't do it, or they're not in the position, or they don't want to do it anymore, and we make those transitions earlier and we allow people to do that, the better it is. And I took advantage of this right last year when, because of everything that's going on in the US, my now administrative role kind of blew up, and I had to step down as doctoral consortium chair from CHI 25 last year. And it was a really, really hard thing to do, but I felt good in the end about doing it, that I made the decision early on enough that we were able to find, and I wish I had done it even earlier, that we were able to find somebody else to step into that position. It was hard, but I really highly recommend people to be kind to themselves and to take those steps away when they need to. So again, thank you to my nominator and the committee for seeing all that work. Thank you for the community for working with me. I'd love to tell my family that I'm done, but I think they know that's not really true. I still serve because I care, and I know you do, but thank you. You want me to change it? Okay. That's awesome.
Working now? Working now? Okay, great. All right. So again, equally an honor to be introducing Cliff Lampe. This award recognizes Cliff for his extraordinary and field-shaping contributions to the SIGCHI community. First, I want to just remind you all of this wonderful blog post that Cliff wrote many years ago, which says why he loves academic service. That was really my introduction to the idea of academic service. And we all know Cliff's service record has been extensive and impactful. He's held numerous leadership roles in SIGCHI and the broader HCI community, many years of service on the SIGCHI EC, leadership within multiple CHI organizing committees, stewardship of key strategic initiatives at CHI, as well as the SIG more broadly. Cliff has served as the CSCW Steering Committee Chair, CHI Student Volunteer Chair, twice CHI Technical Program Chair, CHI General Chair, CHI Steering Committee Chair. And honestly, these are just the roles that I know about, and I'm sure that there's a longer list somewhere. In each of these roles, Cliff has demonstrated that he's been very thoughtful, pragmatic, and commitment to the advancement of both the field and the SIG. I've been working with Cliff since I was Vice President at large, as Helena mentioned, and this is when Helena Mentis was president, and Cliff supported Helena's vision, helped the community transition through the pandemic, remaining responsive to the needs of a changing world. I would say there's not a crisis faced that I haven't seen him deal with head on, and that was clear in the time that we worked together on the SIGCHI EC for about 1.5 years, but also after that when he took on the role of General Chair of CHI 22. This is the SIG's first CHI after the pandemic broke out, and Cliff and his co-chair Simone Barbosa were responsible for ensuring that the flagship made a strong return after COVID, and it really meant a lot for the well-being of the SIG and the conference series.
How many did I give COVID? How many got COVID from that?
Me,
all right,
also.
Yeah, me too. All right.
He also dealt with the challenge of moving CHI to hybrid, unafraid to experiment, again at a seriously difficult time, and maybe lost a bit of money for us, but it was great to do the conference as we did, honestly, no regrets. And through this, as with his other commitments to the SIG, Cliff has always demonstrated a rare combination of leadership, mentorship, and honestly, I think of Cliff as someone who's not a positional leader. I mean, the problem, small or large, he is always willing to take it on and help anyone who comes to him for help. He's led the CHI Steering Committee, particularly through a significant transition to a new format that we're all seeing at CHI 2026. And as he commonly says, he's been in almost every significant service role in the SIG and remains ever willing to serve. And what sets Cliff apart, as I mentioned, is not only the volume of his service, but its character. He leads without ego, he builds bridges across groups, he elevates the work of others, and his mentorship has been felt across generations of scholars and practitioners, many of whom cite him as one of the first people to welcome them into the community. He's helped shape how SIGCHI thinks about governance, diversity and inclusion, volunteer development. He was the first, as you remember, to have equity and access chairs, along with the governance team of CHI back in 2022. And really, there's such a long list of things that we have to thank Cliff for, and it all kind of comes together when he, can stand here and say, "Hi, I'm Cliff," right? And so, simply put, SIGCHI is better because of you, Cliff. Thank you for being, for making us more inclusive, more welcoming, and more capable of supporting a diverse and global membership. The Lifetime Service Award recognizes individuals whose contributions have shaped SIGCHI in enduring ways, and Cliff definitely embodies this ideal fully. So with that, I will hand it over to Cliff.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Neha. That's super sweet. I do have a slide. If you're having trouble getting on the internet, the CCIB network seems to be working in here. So I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between the two a little bit. Let's see. This is inconvenient, but that's fine. So where are we at with this one? All right, so of the people who have 2 votes so far, and we're pretty bipolar, I'll go back to the slide so you can vote, and I'll get started, and we'll come back to Slido off and on to keep it peppy. Yeah, thanks for having me here. It's such an honor. Thank you, Neha, for the nomination, and to the awards committee for following through with it. And thanks to you all for the opportunity to do service for this many years. I think I've worked with almost everybody in this room at one point or the other. So really, riding your coattails all has brought me to a pretty good point here. I appreciate it. And of course, like Helena said last night, we have to thank our families, right? They're the ones we steal the most time from when we do this. I think my kid's name is Brock. I'm trying to remember. And I think he's around, what is he, 8? No, 13? Something like that. So hopefully he can take this plaque to his therapist and they can work together with it. I'm just kidding. So when we talked about what I would talk about, Helena's comments were great. Her myth busting, I think, is right on every point. I totally agree with them. I went with a slightly different tack. I went with the Lampe rules for service. Now, these are the Lampe family rules. My kid has memorized them. My wife and I talk about them all the time. They are set. I'm going to go through some of them. Many of you have heard of them. I keep dropping them in conversation. Many of you are entirely sick of them. Max has asked explicitly to stop using a couple of them in meetings and everything. So I thought I'd go through the whole list, because it's almost mythical at this point where this list comes from, and talk about how I use these things for service. And I'll say, for many of you, you're going to notice that every Lampe rule is a cliche, right? Is the first thing you're going to notice, right? And that always innerly amuses me, because Lampe is pretty cliche. So it's just part of our basic nature. And then the other thing you'll notice is that sometimes they use English idioms, and I'll explain those for those of you who aren't as familiar with some of these English idioms. All right, so the first one I say, the Lampe rule number 1, the first rule all the time in the Lampe rule, oh, that's always great, isn't it? Is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the possible. Now, to his credit, oh, that doesn't go through. Voltaire said this first, right? He said, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I like the kind of, sound of perfect and possible in the sentence. And there's a few things that I mean by this, right? One is that when you're dealing with complex organizations of any type, including CHI or CSCW or SIGCHI or any complex volunteer organization, there's rarely a perfect solution. I've been talking to people for the last couple of days about what to do about so many parallel tracks, right? How do we solve the problem of so many parallel tracks at CHI? And there's a bunch of solutions, right? We could drastically reduce the acceptance rate. We could only let best papers present. We could have a separate curation process for people presenting, right? There's lots and lots of things. People come up to me with what they think is an obvious solution all the time. But the problem is that rarely are any of these things perfect solutions, right? And there's not going to be any perfect solution. Every one has pros and cons, and we have to recognize those and be realistic about them and just try to make things better, right? Organizing and service are about trying to make things better, and you do that incrementally, right? Small moves on the dial, right? And if you keep making small moves, if you keep making marginal improvements in a process, eventually those lead to big improvements, right? And as Helena was saying, it takes years to do that, right? It's never done in one simple, easy swoop. But if you are persistent, then you can make these changes over time, and you can have big effects on things you think are right and wrong in the conference. A thing to remember, too, that I always try to remember, both people in my own organization for my day job and people in the CHI community, is that iteration is the core of HCI work, right? It's the core of science, is to iterate, is to test and to retest. And if something doesn't work, okay, now we know, we'll try something else, right? It's the idea that any decision we make is written in stone. And yeah, there definitely becomes things people hang on to, and it can be hard to change things. But iteration is core to CHI. And then finally, someone is going to be unhappy with your decisions. Every time, every decision you make at CHI, everything you do, whether it be organizing a conference or creating a new program, I've rarely run into something I've launched that has been unambiguously popular with people, right? Almost always there's somebody who's a critic of it, and that's okay. They're not wrong to critique it. Maybe they have something I need to hear. It's just, I think sometimes people get into their feelings when people criticize them and they take it personally when people are angry about a change that you make at a conference, but it's okay. It's not going to be perfect. People are going to be upset by that, and it's okay for them to be upset by that. All right. Oh, there's Voltaire. Okay, this is the one that I get the most requests to retire. Make sure the juice is worth the squeeze, right? This is an English idiom, which means that it basically makes sure that the cost-benefit analysis is right? Make sure that the effort that you're putting into something is worth the change that you are making. So, for me, volunteer time and energy is precious, especially of other people's. Mine I'll spend freely, but I'm much more conservative about how I try to spend other people's time. And that means that if we're going to do something, is it going to benefit enough people to make it worthwhile? Is the change that's going to require so much effort going to be worth it? If we make a change, who does that work, right? Oftentimes people will recommend a change without recognizing that they're volunteering other people for work to make that change happen, right? And so the juice versus the squeeze thing, this was the CHI 22, the executive events in CHI 2022 gave me a mug with this emblazoned on it because I said it a lot during that conference. What are the things that are worth doing, right? What are the things that are not worth doing? And it helps me. All of these are just task-orienting cognitions, really. If you follow psychology, this is a great part of psychological practice, is having a task-orienting cognition, and that's all this is. How do we prioritize our resources? How do we make good decisions? How do we do the next right thing? All of that for me is just juice and squeeze, man, right? Like you just figure it out. Now, what I don't think I've ever told anybody in the community, and my shameful secret, is I pull this phrase from the incredibly forgettable mid-2000s meeting, The Girl Next Door. And it's spoken by a pornography producer to a young high school student. And so that is where I get the phrase. Yeah, so that's again, right? Classy, right? All right, Lampe rule number 3, not my monkey, not my zoo. Now, the common framing of this is not my circus, not my monkey is the common thing. And what this idiom means is, this thing doesn't belong to me and I'm not responsible for it, right? I read a little bit more into it, right, which is to be aware of what you can control and what you can't, right? Like sometimes people are upset about something and I'll listen to them be upset and be there to be a listening ear. But it's not my thing to control. It's some other conference or some other committee or some higher committees, and I try to point them in the right direction. But I don't try to imagine for a second that I am in control of all things or that I can change all things, right? I try to be pretty clear about what are the things I can control. And often what this means for the CHI community or for SIGCHI organizing is, the first and often last thing I can control is myself, right, and my reactions to people, and what happens when somebody calls me an idiot or inappropriate or foolish or whatever in the various channels in which I hear that, right? The thing that I control, what is my monkey, what is my zoo, is my internal state and how I react to things, right? And that's the thing I choose to try to maintain the most control over. Barry Brown caught me yesterday and he's like, I love your posts on CHI Meta. You come across as patrician, right? Patient. And I know that the first version of your comment on CHI Meta is filled with expletives and accusations, right? Yeah, I'm human, right? I get mad just like everybody else, but you take that breath and you just figure like the thing that I can control is me, and I'm going to control myself in this situation and be a positive force, right? I'm going to feed the good wolf. I'm going to be a person who puts light into the world, not just keeps adding toxicity. And then part of this for my rule is I just don't spend time or energy on things I can't control, right? If a higher level, like in my day job, if a higher level admin has made a decision and I don't have any impact on that, I don't spend time worrying about that, right? Like I don't, even mentally, I don't go over it in my head. That's what it is. It's the situation, I deal with it, and that's the next thing, right? In the context that now exists outside of my control, what can I do within the things that I can control? And that's how I approach service often, right? Like there's so many things in service that are outside of your control. Being clear about what are those things that are actually in your control, that's a really important thing. All right, we're skipping ahead a little bit to Lampe rule number 7. Don't try to push a rope. Anybody hear this phrase before? Anybody's parents say this to them? Just a couple of you? What this means is, have you ever tried to push a rope? It's pretty self-evident, right? Ropes are designed to be pulled. The nature of the rope is that it's made to pull things, and pushing a rope just is a useless activity. How I translate this into my service activity is, again, don't spending time and energy on things to get things to act against their nature. One of the things that freed me up most when I was a junior scholar is realizing that I wasn't responsible for other people's moods, emotions, behaviors, thoughts, any of that, right? Like, I can do what I can. I can be a nice person. I can control my side of the fence. But if somebody's taking on a particular dark viewpoint or is feeling angry or upset about something, sometimes, often that's on them, right? And there are people, I love them in this community, who are, ornery by nature. And that's fine. That's just their nature. I'm not going to try to change them. It would be inappropriate for me to try to change them, right? Just approach the world for what it is and, work with it. I think that works the best. The other way I use this is understand how the system is designed and do what you can within that system. One of the things I often see with SIGCHI volunteering is people don't take the time to look at budgets, understand the ACM structure, think about the broader structure of conferences, read the documentation, look at what the system is, right? When you're thinking about the design of the system and how you can or can't use that to make change in your organization, it actually is important to take a breath and try to understand what that system is. Both kind of the explicit things, like what is our organizational structure, but also the implicit things, right? Who are the powerful voices that don't have an official role, but people are still going to listen to them, right? What are kind of these implicit things as well? All right, and then Lampe rule number 10, don't yuck someone's yum, right? This is often in the United States used as a kindergarten phrasing, and what it means is basically don't insult what somebody likes just because you don't like it. How I relate this to academic services, the realization that this is a heterogeneous community, right? People need, want, and prefer different things. And just because I don't need or want or prefer those same things doesn't make what they need invalid, right? Like I need to listen to people and understand what it is they're telling me because I can't, it's again, you would think this is core to HCI, right? Kind of the fundamental premise of our entire field is, the engineer's insight or intuition in how to design something isn't entirely correct and we should listen to users. It's the same basic function of that, right? I try to listen to people and hear what they need, right? Like, I love case studies. I love them greatly. But if other people don't, then I have to listen to that for whatever reason. And so then, my experience may not be universal. One of the biggest pitfalls I see when people do academic service is thinking that the way they experience Chi or the way that they like things or the way that the research that they particularly prefer method is the right way to do things just because that's how they do it. To me, that's just a sheer sign of insecurity, right? Like if you are built into this idea that the only right way is the way that you're doing things, it's probably because of some insecurity level. For me, there's so many ways to be, so many ways to go about it that I try to be generous about all of that. And then, finally, I don't have to agree with other people about how they do an experience or do a job or anything like that, right? I can disagree with somebody and still think they're a great person, right? Like, that's okay. I don't have to basically pour negative energy over their ideas or them as a person, especially if we disagree on something. So that's the full list of Lampe rules. Oh, yep, Ivan's taking a picture. I'll get T-shirts printed out. Some of these don't ask about. Number 5, I can't quite explain. It came from my father, who's not a perfect person. But this is the full set. And like I said, in the Lampe family, we have these memorized, and we use almost all of them on a daily basis. Yeah, that's the don't yuck someone's yum. All right, let's go back to Slido for a second, see if more people got to answer. 9 votes. All right, let's see if we're going to do one. So I'm going to ask a question. We will launch this one. What is your favorite service activity you've ever done? Wait for you for a second. All right, we'll come back to that. I'll finish up some comments, so we'll give you a chance to add some things to that. All right, so those are the Lampe rules. There are some other things I try to think about, some other thoughts on service that I think is important to share. One is that this is about relationships, not about jobs necessarily. I mean, Helena and I have been working together for, like she said, 20 years. One of us looks the same, one of us does not over that period of time. And we've had how many different jobs in between us? Yeah. But it's the relationship, it's the fact that we can work together, that I respect her, that we respect each other, that we can get that work done productively. Those relationships are durable, right? They will transcend jobs over time and allow you to actually be more productive and more effective. So to me, SIGCHI is about relationships more than it's about anything else at the end of the day. And that pays off. Like, you know, we don't get paid in money, as Helena said, but we do get paid in other ways, I feel like. Like when my house burned down a few years ago, it was SIGCHI that reached out first, right? People sent stuff to my house. They gave me a very nice gift card. It was, you know, those relationships that mattered. Another principle I like is stand up for principles, not processes, right? And by this I mean, like, what's the core thing? I care about including people in the community. I don't care about any program. I don't care about any track. I don't care about any conference, really, at the end of the day. What I care about is the community of SIGCHI. I care about the inclusion of scholars in that community. I care about rigorous, high-quality science that we can do at the best of its ability. Whatever those things are for you, like, stay focused on what's the principle and then be flexible about whatever process gets you to that principle, right? Like, I've never tied to any particular process. This one actually comes from recovery treatment. It's one of the things they teach you in early recovery when you're feeling overwhelmed, which is just do the next right thing, right? If you're ever in doubt, if you're ever thinking I'm overwhelmed by all of these things, just figure out what's the next right thing I can do and do it. My grandmother phrased this as, if you're feeling a certain way, grab a mop, right? Like, there's always work you can do. Like, and that's often, I think I get some credit for taking on whatever shitty jobs in front of me. And that's partially because I don't see, like, it's just the work, right? Like, you've got time to lean, you got time to clean, right? And so I'm always happy to do any service work that stands in front of me. Helena mentioned this a little bit too, service is leadership and vice versa, right? It's not authority-filled, it's not powerful, but it is persuasion. I see the same thing in my day job as administration in higher ed, right? I don't have a lot of power there, even as an associate dean, right? It's about persuasion. It's about setting up systems that help people. It's, you know, every time I've done academic service, it's a form of leadership, even in the lowest roles I've been in, right? But at the same time, all forms of leadership, I feel best when I'm doing it, when I see it as an act of service to the people I'm administering, right? And helping their lives better. Like, I think about this with my faculty all the time, even though they don't believe it. I don't think any of them are in the room. I'll think about that for the next day or so. Oh, thanks, Florian. I got Florian here. But even though they might not see it, I'm always thinking, like, you know, how can I make sure they're resourced in the classroom in a way that we can afford? How can I make sure that we have a way of matching classes that they like, or that we can make these changes without killing them? Because I think that's such an important perspective to have in leadership. And then finally, assume good intent, right? Even when people have been the maddest at me, even when it's been like spittle in the face mad kind of thing, or screaming matches, or all these tough days, I don't think I've ever been uncertain that people were approaching it with good intent, right? We may disagree about what the right thing to do is or what the right priority is, but I've never met anybody in SIGCHI at any level who I didn't think cared about the community, cared about research, cared about the area of research. And so I've never, I just assume everybody is in it because they care. And, if they're passionate about that, that just tells me they care a lot, and I can work with that, right? And so, I think assuming good intent is good, because there is sometimes people yell at us, and that can feel bad, but it's a great way to, I think, just make sure you're keeping your equanimity in the whole process. All right, so let's go where we're at. Slido. Okay, so we have, working with a group to steer a community through global challenge. That's fantastic. Organizing the student volunteer party. Absolutely, that's the best event of the year. Happiness manager. Ooh, I want to do that. Mentoring, I think many of us find rewarding. WISC conference chair, yeah, Brad, right. Like it's, those times when you can really help a community out. VTech around mentoring, Petra, steering committee at Viz, and you can see, when you said Kai 2026, that's great. That's nice to hear, buddy, on this 4th day of the conference. And so, go thinking about that, and then one final question, and then we'll kind of open it up to the mics and everything. What is the biggest thing you think you've learned from service? Oops, I did that incorrectly. I use Slido every day when I teach, and I still did it incorrectly. And with that, thank you very much. We'll leave that up while we do other questions and things like that in the traditional way. We also have Slido open for questions if you want to ask them there. But thank you.
So thank you, Helena. Thank you, Cliff. You saw the Slido code. Should we keep that on, actually? Can we keep the Slido link on? Otherwise, you're welcome to come up to the microphone or just raise your hand and we'll bring the mic.
Yeah, that QR code should lead to the Slido link as well.
It's not about
Hello. Thank you both. Wonderful talks, as expected. I know that you both mentioned that you have, or at least did have, families, which is lovely to know.
Mine are somewhere. I just don't know where.
What do you hope your children have learned and gained from your service to SIGCHI?
Is it on? Is it on?
Hmm?
Yeah. So I'm not allowed to talk. I know it's not.
Oh, it was on. Did you turn it off?
I must have.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to talk about SIGCHI anymore at home. It's kind of more like a curse word now. But I would say that there's two things. So the first is that my kids probably recognize that their mom is able to do a lot, and I hope that that's a good role model for them. Most of you have seen them at Kai at least a couple times since like my oldest was a baby. He was in like a Kai Kids at 2016. But I definitely also hear my children reflecting back to me that they don't want to work as hard as I do. And I'm saying that in all seriousness. So I really do, I'm taking that to heart more, and I'm trying to have more work-life balance. And if I can pass that on to other people to really think about that, because you don't serve anybody until, your cup is full and taken care of. So put your own mask on, whatever the analogy is that everybody uses.
Yeah. I mean, I teach my kid the Lampe rules, right? So I don't want to start the cult here specifically, but they are rules for living, not just for doing academic service. So he does actually use them in some of his stuff. But other than that, they are refreshingly uncaring about any of this stuff, right? Last night I posted a pic of myself at the awards banquet with my award and stuff like that. I went to the family chat, and my kid texts back hey, Mom, can you pick me up earlier? Okay, yeah, all right. Fair enough.
My daughter said to me, "What's that?" like we've been talking. She knows we're not at home. My husband's somewhere in the audience, and she's just she doesn't care.
Yeah. Good. I like that.
Hi, I'm in. Hello. This is going to be primarily directed at Cliff, but Helena, you play a role in this too. Quick story. One day, a large man lumbered towards me and asked me to be on the executive committee.
We call that the Sasquatch Shuffle.
To run ops. And I didn't want to do it, and you told me you gave me a lot of platitudes, and so I said okay. And then I found myself working aside Helena, and it was absolutely fantastic. And then the Sasquatch told me, "Hey, I'm running Kai. I need someone who understands the technical stack to run the technical program." And I said, "Okay, sure." And then a couple years later, the Sasquatch pushed me forward to say, "Hey, you should nominate to run for general chair of Kai in 26 in Barcelona," and here I am, and here we are. So my question is, Cliff, what am I supposed to do next?
Yeah. Well, I hear that they're actually doing elections for SIGCHI EC.
Come back to the family.
Don't threaten me with service assignments, buddy. I got you.
But wait a minute, who's going to tell me what to do next, Cliff?
Neha.
Yeah. she's like, no.
What else we got?
I'll take your joke seriously.
Uh-oh.
How do you decide when the right thing to do in service is to step aside and let other people in the organization who are not yet as capable build themselves up by taking on the roles that you know you could do really well?
Yeah.
One clear sign is when they give you a lifetime service award.
I actually really love this question. So a long time ago, it was a Nin Day who made, he doesn't even remember making this comment to me, but he was like, when you take a role, the first thing you should do is start thinking about who's going to take it over after. And I really was like, oh my God, that's such a good point, because it takes time to mentor people into those roles. And so I'm constantly like giving people little bits of things and seeing how they react. And I'm like making mental notes. I'm like, hey, they're great. They're handling it great. And then there are other people in this audience who will know that I've been sort of like spending the entire week being like, and now you should do this and do this, kind of the way Cliff is. I'm very happy to not do the work, to be totally honest. And I believe that like it doesn't need to be the perfect. It just has to be somebody who's passionate and willing to learn and willing to, take the time themselves. And so like if you show any type of confidence in what you're doing or excitement about being part of it, I've probably already tested you, and I have you on my list.
I think another key aspect of that is being really aware of who you are as a leader and as a volunteer, right? So they put me through this like leadership training a few years ago, and we did all these things, and like that's one of the things I realized about myself is like Helena's a builder and I'm a breaker, right? Like
It's really true.
she builds systems, she documents them, they're durable, they last for a long time because she builds them very well. I'm good at handling messy, chaotic situations that there's a lot of emotion and feeling about, and then breaking things just enough so we can refix them, right? Like, I think for me, it's realizing, I'm not good at everything in service, and I should let other people do those things I'm not good at. But also, like, am I really necessary for this job, right? I'm not necessary for it, then somebody else should be brought up to do it, for sure.
I think this goes back to the relationships conversation that we were having as well. Like, you should know what you're good at, and then you should partner with somebody who complements you. And I've got actually lots of volunteer partnerships with all my different hats on. There's a person who has usually a different sort of way of reacting to the situations, and I love that because I know I don't have the answer to every single one, and so I rely on that back and forth. And this is why I encourage you to build those relationships in service, and why I love that we have co-chairs for so many different roles, and to find that person who complements your skill set.
Yeah, I wish I had that more in my day job. That'd be
Yeah,
nice.
I honestly agree with that.
Next question.
Uh-oh. ACM president's asking a question.
Yeah.
Hi, this is actually not really a question, but I just want to say that since I've been a professor of some sort, Cliff has consistently asked me he's always come to me and said, hey, the executive committee is thinking about this. What do you think?
Oh, that's cool.
Like every single time I've ever been at Chi, basically. And I have such immense gratitude for that, and that's why I'm here at this session. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, man. You've always given great answers, too, so I appreciate it. Thanks.
And that's a really great model for how to do that kind of service. So I think that the organization owes a lot to you for that.
Thank you.
I guess that's me. Congratulations to both. Whatever you have done, watching it from some distance myself is amazing. And no, it won't be that scary of a question. Don't go away. Both of you talked about Chi and SIGCHI being your home, your family, next to your other family, and so on, of course. And you've learned a lot, you've given a lot. You have a Lifetime Achievement Award in the context of SIGCHI. Chi is part of an extended family, ACM, and your experience there. Chi has been pioneer, SIGCHI and Chi as a conference has been a pioneer in many ways and has helped ACM grow. So I'm wondering, are you ready to go to the next level and offer service to your extended family called ACM?
God, I saw that coming.
Sure. Like, I mean, I would love to do that, right? It's more to me about what's the job and can I be helpful? Like, I love doing academic service. And like I've said in other locations, I know for a lot of people it feels extractive and it's not appreciated by your home units, but it's always given me so much more than what it's taken from me, right? Like, I have colleagues from all over the world who I respect and appreciate. I meet people and get to know them in ways I wouldn't if I were just here as a pure researcher. I learn about organizational processes. It's trained me as a leader, right? Like the reason I got my leadership job at my university is because of the leadership I showed at SIGCHI. So it's, all of these things, it's been the most fantastic training ground for me, and I'm always happy to pay it back to the ACM, the larger SIG group overall.
So when I was putting together the myths about the fact that folks might think that they're too junior, one of the things that I wanted to highlight is that the more senior folks in the community are doing things like going off to ACM, taking administration jobs within their own organizations, leading research institutes, et cetera. It's inevitable as you become the more senior you get into next steps. I was excited when I was able to step down from the SIGCHI president and move on to do things for ACM. So I'm still on COPE, for instance, based on the work that I'd been doing with CARES. And that's been fantastic because now I'm learning another level above and I'm bringing that knowledge back down to SIGCHI as well. So it's not always just like informing up, but it's also bringing more knowledge down. So yeah, it's always about what is the job and what do they need and how many hours do I have in a day? I've heard there's 48 in a day, so.
Yeah, you can always get less sleep.
What's that?
Oh, that's great. I know your email addresses.
Oh, crap.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys a question. Would anybody add a Lampe rule? What's your rule for service? Anything that you would do? Joe's got one. I knew it.
Don't be afraid of making mistakes. You will,
Yeah.
but own them, apologize, try to make it right and move on.
Yeah. 100%, right? Don't be afraid to apologize. Don't be like a certain U.S. president and
Yeah.
think that it's a weakness. Right?
Yep.
Who else has got a rule they want to add to the pile? Ayman. Then we got Yanis after that.
This is it's an Egyptian phrase that my dad used to say, actually, and translated, it's a monkey to its mother is like a gazelle, which is, anyone, if someone creates something, it's perfect, it's a thing of beauty, but it might not be. But you have to remember that they think it is because it's their thing. So it's something I always think about to take consideration before usually I sunset something or turn something off or turn something on. Always have to remember that, some people had ownership of that, and despite it may be causing problems, they really loved it, and try to make sure that you can get a better balance. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. A monkey to its mother is a gazelle. Love that. We have Yanis over here, Neha.
Two. One is kind of the precursor of what Joe said. Try always to succeed, but be ready to fail, because otherwise you don't risk anything. And it's all, nothing changes. And the other one is that I'm trying to follow. Speak last if you're a leader. First listen, give space to others, and then speak last.
Yeah.
I like that. Speak last. On a purely kind of mechanical note, I learned one from the head lawyer for our university that I try to follow, which is answer email right away. He tries to set a rule where he answers email within 12 hours of receiving it, no matter when he receives it. I don't think I can quite do that, but I do realize that people getting a response, being responsive to people is a sign of respect. It's a sign of care to respond to people quickly. Anybody else got another rule? We got one way up there. Is that VTech?
You're good at this. How do you see?
No is a complete sentence,
Yeah.
both for yourself and to respect that in others when they say no to you.
Yep, for sure. I love that. Except for Ayman, I still have to talk him into other service roles.
Apparently not that hard. Is this on?
So another question we had prepared ahead of time to ask you all is, thinking about this next generation of service, right? What do you see, right? Is there anything we should change in how we bring up this next generation of service leaders? I had lunch today with a former student who's talking about doing service, and she's, reticent to do it because of what it would mean for tenure and things like that. And I respect, that no, of course, so I don't want to do this now, but how do we help more junior people do service? What do people see as that role? Maybe, Helena, you can answer that question first, and then we'll see if anybody else has some ideas.
I mean, that's a really great question. We used to do how to be a volunteer sessions. Do you remember those? I remember Aaron did a few of those as he would go around to conferences. And we felt that a lot of it was that people didn't understand what service was, particularly junior folks. They thought the only service was being a reviewer and then an AC and then an SC. And I understand that for a career, that seems really important. But I think a huge part of this is for us to probably not gripe about service in front of them, but also just expose them to the greater opportunities to contribute to the community. So bringing in junior folks in your labs and in your environments, introducing them to the service that you're doing for SIGCHI can help folks see themselves in those roles probably much faster than they would if they just saw Cliff walking down in front of them.
Shuffling. I only shuffle.
Strutting.
Yeah. Alexandra, you have one?
I do. So this just first thing that came to my mind was really about evaluation for tenure, right? Because service is really the last thing we look at. Not the last thing we look at, but we first look at research and teaching, and then evaluation and service is more we don't want you to do a lot of service. But if it's valued differently more, or if it's evaluated differently than it is right now, maybe it will prompt some more junior folks to step up?
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's a tough one, right? Like even at my own institution, I have a struggle making people pay more attention to service. They've kind of like tuned me out in those conversations a lot of times. Navina.
Sorry, okay. So as a junior person who's constantly told that I'm doing an unusual amount of service, I think it's important for people at all levels to actually get rid of the myth that service doesn't help with tenure, in that I think I have learned skills through service that I would not have otherwise. Like, yes, research is research, but to be faculty, to get tenure, to build a great research program, you need leadership skills, and those kinds of skills, those people skills, service is absolutely valuable for picking those up.
I mean, 100%. People don't talk about those benefits of service enough, I don't feel like. It's such great training. And an important way to build a network, right? Like, if I have a student on the market, now I have a global network of people I can turn to, or if I need a favor or whatever. It's just such a valuable thing. We don't talk about it that way, right? We always talk about service as being extractive, right? Like somebody last night said that, at their institution, if I got this award, I'd be told to bury it, right? I did ask ChatGPT if it was a bad sign I got this award.
What did it say?
It said, not for SIGCHI, it's probably okay.
I have a question. So the two of you have worked together through so many years, and there's been so many different challenges. I'm sure there are situations that have arisen where you two have maybe not been in agreement.
Oh, yeah.
So how would you say you've addressed it and worked and continue to work well together?
It's funny enough, that was going to be a myth that I was going to put, and then I had decided not to. But one of the myths that I've heard is, well, nobody ever disagrees with each other on the EC or the SC, or the EC doesn't disagree with the SC. And I just laugh because, first of all, that's not been my experience, and we have funny stories that you can hear about someday. But also, like, we would not be able to get any work done if everybody just, was like, yeah, whatever Neha says. And I would say for the most part, any one of us are looking for folks who come with their own ideas, come with their own perspectives on the community. We all worked really hard to build leadership teams that are diverse perspectives for a reason, because we know that there are so many different problems out there. And we know that that's more work that you have to do in order to get to some type of, maybe not perfect solution, but workable solution, and just say, okay, well, this is what we're going to do as a first step, a second step. But yeah, it's absolutely the case that that the diversity is worth it, because I think that we get to the end point, and as we were pointing out, you and I have very different ways of handling solutions, and maybe, we disagree.
East Coaster over here.
I know, so Midwestern over here. But we find a middle ground somewhere there.
Yeah, I think some of it, we've had explicit conversations. So for instance, when like Helena was president and I was vice president, the conversation was, disagree with me in private and support me in public, right? Like, those kinds of conversations. And sometimes those roles change, like where I'm TPC and she's, late breaking work shares. Like, so, I think having those conversations up front is important, right? Like, here's what I expect out of this relationship as we start working together, and here's what I'd prefer. And then often it feels like, sometimes it's just having the difficult conversation later of like, hey, I really didn't like it when this happened, and I felt this way about it, and et cetera, et cetera. And those are uncomfortable, but often, in my experience, productive. As a Midwesterner, I'm always anxious to avoid those conversations that deal with your feelings and all that stuff, but they often do pay off dividends.
Yeah, and I'm right there in your face. But I think like a key aspect of this is respect. So you can have really strong disagreements. Some people might say yelling. But ultimately, I think like for most people who have worked with me, they know that I respect them and that I'm passionately disagreeing because I think that we can get to a point which would move us forward. If folks are silent and they're not willing to talk with you about things, that's actually more of a problem, because that means they've pretty much shut down. And you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to get to a solution if they're just like shutting down and not wanting to accept. That doesn't mean they're happy. That means that they're just not willing to engage. If you have respect and you're able to engage, even if it seems slightly contentious, to external observers, I'd rather be in that situation. And if I have to continue to do the work to ensure that you understand that I respect you and that I want to talk with you about an issue, then that's what I got to do.
Yeah. Or we used to have a rule for clinking glasses in the EC when the emotions got too high.
We haven't done that in a while. Maybe we don't disagree enough. I have one more question, actually, if no one else. Oh, Regan has a hand raised, so I'll come back. Okay, let me go first. So both of you obviously care so deeply about the SIG and about Kai.
Hey.
What are your highest aspirations for both the conference series and the SIG, separately and together?
What were or what are?
What are?
I don't know, world domination?
I mean, for the area of HCI, I have pretty grand plans, right? Where we start making more policy implications. We are, and I think Ben Schneiderman last night at the awards dinner made a really good point about this, where we used to struggle for recognition, and now like the field is recognized, and that's thanks to pioneers, many of whom are here tonight, who brought us to that point. Now it's our job to move the field, I think, even further along that framework, where we are considered in policy decisions and making laws, where HCI work is at the heart of business processes, where it's considered when we design anything. And one of the things I'm happiest about is that it's moving outside of like tech and screens, and those principles are being applied to broader manufacturing, to retail, to all sorts of environments. So that's my broad goal for the field, and I see SIGCHI and Kai as playing major roles in that, as being these really important organizations that help facilitate researchers in accomplishing those goals, right? And part of how we do that is we create space for them to get together. We basically create like an empty structure that they fill and create all this beautiful progress. And so in doing that, my biggest goals are to make sure anybody who has ideas that they can contribute to that larger goal is able somehow to contribute in the community, right? That we're not shutting people out of the conversation for things they can't control, right? And things like that. We've all worked, you've done more than anybody to try to make those things possible for people. And then also, because that is such a big goal, our research has to be rock solid, right? I want our science to be top notch, because if we're going to have that impact on the world, we can't come in with, weak science. It has to be top notch. So goal one always for me is making sure that Kai is leading the way on what is exceptional HCI research.
So I appreciate Cliff taking that first, because I just don't think I had an answer off the top of my head. And I think the reason is because when I think about the organization, SIGCHI, and when I think about the conference series, I don't want to have that vision. I want these entities to be able to continue to support the community in a collective manner in which they're wanting to go. And I think that may change drastically. It could potentially change quite a lot in the next 10 years. I don't think I don't think any of us know. Reagan will know that we did this because we were trying to figure out what 2030 would look like a while ago. And the community is really like, you don't realize that a lot of the changes are really driven by the community. When the community acts, the SIG and the conference are reacting, and then the SIG and the conference act and the community reacts, and it's this process. So I don't think like I have like a vision, or I should even be the one that states what that is. I'm excited to co-create that within the community, and shockingly for me to say like engage in that messiness, because that's what it is.
Thank you. Regan.
I would love to follow up on that, but I think we're running out of time. I just want to say, like, thank you to both of you. I've had the pleasure of working alongside of you in different roles, and I've learned a lot from both of you. Cliff, from you, I've learned a lot about listening and a lot about delegation, which I'm still really bad at, but working on. Helena, from you, I learned a lot about like communication, both internally and externally, and conflict management. And from both of you, and some of the best leaders, I think, in our community, don't ask anyone to do something that you wouldn't be willing to do yourself, right? We see people do this all the time. It's not one of your Lampe rules, but maybe it should be, because I see both of you like digging in and doing the scut work, you know, like, and that, I don't know if everyone sees that when you're so visible because you're on the stage, and you have these very visible, high-profile roles that you're just doing the scut work when it needs to get done, you know, mucking out the stalls or whatever Cliff would say in that situation. My question for you, though, is about, you've both taken on these leadership roles in your institutions as well. And in those situations, it's your job. The people that you're working with, it's their job. They're paid to be there. They have a role. And when you're working in these volunteer organizations, everyone's here of their own free will, and it creates a very different vibe. And I'm just wondering if you have any reflections on like transferring those skills back and forth, and what is really like in terms of a volunteer organization when everyone's choosing to be there, and is that different, or is it more difficult or easier in some way to both serve and lead?
This is such a great question. So
That's a good question. Yeah. Good question, Regan.
Good question, Regan.
Damn,
Regan. I see leadership very much, it's very similar. This kind of goes back to what Navina was saying, like you're learning these skills because, who said this recently to me, that like what was it, maybe your slides, that it's not really about telling people what to do, it's about encouraging, convincing, supporting people to achieve things. And, I see my role very much in aligning what people are capable of doing with what are the needs of what they want to do, and finding sometimes a path of least resistance. So I don't think there's much of a difference in those two roles. I think the difference comes really down to time. And I think we forget that sometimes with these volunteer positions that, technically, I think we're supposed to spend 10% of our time on volunteering, and I don't think I've ever spent just 10% of my time on volunteering. Oh yeah, sleeping. Okay, that's what I gave up.
Yeah.
But because of that, you have to have a little bit more patience and willingness to engage people with what they're able to give you at any given moment with regards to their time. But maybe you disagree. You're in a higher position.
I was reflecting on that, thinking at first there was no difference. And I think that's true for some cases, right? So for faculty dealing with other professors, I don't feel like there's much difference between organizing SIGCHI and working the department, right? Florian will tell you, they'll push back on me hard and have told me they don't like my ideas and a whole bunch of stuff, right? Yeah. And it's more persuasion and stuff like that. But when I was thinking about it, I work with a lot more than just especially tenure track faculty. The thing I've learned in an admin role is working with staff and with lecturers and more people who are on contracts like that I have to be more careful than I typically am in my volunteering, right? In my volunteering, I'm just a voice amongst many, right? And granted, my Sasquatch size, helps me stand out, but it's I'm just a member, I'm just another volunteer. Whereas if I'm somebody's actual boss and sign their time card, that creates a power differential that's very different than anything I think I've experienced. Yeah, I see Pejman nodding too, because you've experienced this too, right? It's just that power differential means I have to be much more careful than I would be otherwise, right? I'm not a careful guy. I think everybody here knows that. Saying stuff off the top of my head or making a quip or something like that, my HR department finds that much less funny than anybody else does. So, that's been the big difference, is who I'm interacting with. I have to really change as opposed to when I'm in SIGCHI.
Yeah, I guess is something to be said about there is actual like power when you are somebody's boss, which is not quite the situation that you like. It's perceived power when you're like in the general chair or something, and so you definitely have to be aware of those dynamics, and that would be a huge change in how I interact with folks.
They don't like my casual drug use references in HR meetings.
So thank you both for your talks, and also, as you mentioned, same as many other people in this room, it's been an honor to be near you and learn from you both. I have a question, and I'm wondering if there are any regrets over your last 20, 25 years of service to SIGCHI or in general. Like, do you have any regrets, like things that you basically think you shouldn't have done, excluding inviting me to work with you?
All right, we'll leave that one off.
Yeah, this is a given.
I mean, there's definitely been things I've messed up, right? Like Helena talked about a couple of things where she made errors back in the day, and there have been things where I've screwed up, like didn't communicate the right thing at the right time, or like, didn't listen to the right person at the right time, or, things like that. I don't actually regret those things. I don't spend much time thinking about them. And I have to say, like, my wife thinks I'm psychopathic about this. I don't spend any time on regret, like stuff like that. It's just, for me, not a useful use of mental energy. There are things, like, if I had to redo them, would I do them differently? Nah, I like it all. It's been fun.
Well, yes, I probably have things that I regret, and I do think about, because I learned a lot in the process, but that's probably why I don't regret them, because like I can't imagine that in any point in my life, and even now, that I know how to handle every situation. And oftentimes I'm relating, even now in my administrative position at my university, I'm like, oh, this is like when that thing happened in SIGCHI. So all of those experiences have been so wonderful and beneficial, going back to what Navina was saying about it's a learning experience, and you can continue to use this knowledge and move forward in your own institution and your scientific community. So yeah, I'm not going to want to regret and undo anything. I think if there was one thing I would want people to know that I did learn from every one of those, and to know that I am, of course, sorry, and I hope someday that they can forgive me if they haven't already.
We had good intentions.
Always gonna. I always say this, especially going back to. Sometimes you can't change upper administration points that they make. Assume that I had the good intentions, I was just incompetent. It's okay to just assume that I didn't know what I was doing. But I'm willing to always put the work in, and I think for the most part, that is every volunteer that I've ever met, that they're willing to put the work in and to learn from that and to try to move on to the next stage, because we are a family deep down inside. Like, we're stuck with each other as long as you don't change your research path entirely. So, we have to continue to work with one another.
Thank you, Helena. Thank you, Cliff. On that note, I want to just congratulate you on the awards, and thank you for your incredible leadership. We are better with your service, for your service. Thank you all for listening, and I guess enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks everybody.